Yeah. Hey, Scott. How's it going?
Good, Joe. How are you?
Doing really well. So glad, dude. I love spending time with you.
Likewise.
Anytime I get Scott time, anytime I get Scott time, it's
Yeah, that's weird. We saw each other in real life recently, and I'm like, I was like, I did a triple take. I'm like, I see you all the time, but it's always online.
always online. And even that's good, though. Scott, just thank you so much, man. I got to ask you this question because you talk in a very, you use unique words. Um, and you had this, you kept talking about mattering and the science of mattering.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you added science to it. To me, science is like laboratory,
Uh-huh.
amoebas, microscope, space. I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, but you talk about the science of mattering. Can you give me some context to that? Like, what do you mean by mattering?
Yeah. Yes. Thanks for noticing my vernacular. And I'm using the science of in that it's been studied and measured and lots of different studies, lots of different kind of environments to see if are there core principles that relate and are relevant to other people. So I'll tell you my like how I got there real quickly. I've worked mostly for the past 20 something years with kids, teenagers, and college students who are transitioning to life and through really youth development. One of the things I've been invited to do in with schools and education leaders and kind of after school programs is to essentially train adults how to work with kids. And primarily, I'd say that the number one request is, can I come in and teach adults how to build connection? Student connection is like a phrase that exists in the education world, whether it's elementary, middle school, or high school, and college too. We want students to connect. And then the theory, kind of the science behind that is when students feel like they connect, then they do better. They go to school more often, they do better academically. So it's a pretty easy formula. And what I've done then is I realized for me, I think from a student perspective, that a kid feels like they connect when they know the adults. So if you can think back growing up, if you had them, I only had a couple teachers or coaches that I felt connected to. And in hindsight, and I have like two or three that pop out. Mr. Rowland, English teacher, sophomore and junior year of high school. I had Mr. Neve, who was a social studies teacher, and in seventh grade, Mrs. McLaughlin, my fourth grade teacher. I don't know if you have any that you connected to.
A few. Yeah, yeah. A couple of names just popping in my head. Yeah.
So what I realize is the reason I felt connected is because I knew those teachers. I knew that Mr. Neve, I still remember this. I wrote him an email recently. I found his contact and I sent him an email. And I know that he went to Berkeley. I know that he was getting married. Mr. Rowland, he would come in on Mondays and tell us about things he did, dates he went on with his girlfriend that weekend. So the connection was, I know that adult. And so the training then is simple. Like we want to help adults tell personal stories to kids because then they'll feel connected. But then that's like the start. I would say that's one little step. Uh, but if you don't feel like they know you, then there's something missing. So I would say it's like in the ladder of priority, it's student connection, and then belonging is above that. It's like
Mm.
it's the higher level. And belonging would be the experience a kid has is that um, when you see that adult, they ask you questions. And I remember talking to this young lady. I think she was a senior at high school, and I was doing this like focus group with a bunch of students, and I was asking who are your favorite teachers, and she just mentioned this one teacher, and I just said, "Tell me about that." And she said, "Yeah, you know what?" And she just was like externally processing. She's like, "He's my favorite teacher." And she's like, "It's kind of funny because it's my least favorite subject." I don't remember what the teacher was. Whatever, doesn't matter. And I said, "Oh, okay. Why is that? What is it that you feel like? Why do you like that teacher so much then?" And she said, "Well," and then she starts laughing. She goes, "Actually, I think I like him the most because he asked me about volleyball." I'm like, "Oh, you're a
Okay.
volleyball?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm a volleyball player." And I go, "So what is that?" I'm like, "I really want to know what happens? What's the interaction?" And she goes,
Yeah.
then she starts laughing anymore. She goes, "Actually, I think I can only remember two times that he's asked me about volleyball." And this is like this is around April or May, so the end of the year. And then she's like, "And I actually have worked the hardest in that class." And I'm like, okay, let me paint this picture. It's your least favorite subject that you do the worst in, but it's your favorite teacher who you tried the hardest for. And really what he did was ask you two questions. And she just starts like cracking up. And
Oh
I'm like, it's
man.
not that hard. So those are the two things I've spent years training educators in. And then I started to feel like there's still something missing.
Hmm.
I feel like there's still something missing. And then it's like I stumbled into, I think, the breadcrumbs of just like trying to learn and try to understand and try to observe. I really feel like I just bumped into this thing called the science of mattering.
Hmm.
And it's cool because it's very simple concept. The experience of mattering is when you feel like you are valued. And second part, you feel like you add value to that person or that community or that class. And so connection is I feel like I know you. Belonging is I feel like you know me. But mattering is even a rung above that, or maybe even more foundational if you kind of flip it. Like I feel valued, which how do I feel valued? You notice me. You take time to pause and address me and greet me. You see me. You are curious about me. You ask me questions. You remember things I've said.
Hmm.
Like you consider me different than others. Like that's feeling like you are valued. And then, I mean, to go real Jedi, to go to the next layer, and I feel like you rely upon me. And I think there are so many kids who don't feel like they matter and they go to class. Just imagine the kid that goes to class, sits there, sits in the same class or the same seat, the same desk next to the same kids every day, and nobody even notices that they sat down. Like no one even acknowledges their presence. And you think of the kids who even sit at lunch at a table with the same kids every day. And when you come up, that kid comes up and no one even turns to say, hey, like that happens all day, all the time. It's almost like most kids. And what I think has been like a lightning bolt to me is like, this is actually fundamental to everything. And the data and the research has been explored to say when people feel like they don't matter, like not only are they quiet quitting, but they're checking out. They're getting discouraged, hopeless. They don't engage. They don't come as often. And it leads to some really, really dark things. And it's also so simple. It's
Yeah.
actually an intervention that you can manage. You can actually start like communicating value to people. So that's kind of the, that's more than you probably asked for, but those are kind of the breadcrumbs of how I got to this place of like, oh my gosh, mattering really matters.
Well, man, dude, thank you for giving that context because, like, I think as a parent, I mean, I have two grown, they're young adults now.
Yeah.
But going through that phase, I think as a parent, initially you're like, I just need to get them to help them choose the right college, the right degree plan, and
Yeah.
then get them in a career in a job. It's very surface level, but as a parent, you feel like, man, I'm doing them justice.
Yeah.
But you're going so much deeper because you're tapping into the mental health of people. Like this is wellness,
Oh yeah.
and 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 uh, and and so I want to park that part because there's also this other area that you heavily invest your time in, and it's with over the past, gosh, how long, 10 years now with
Yeah.
veterans. You've been doing a lot of deep work.
Yeah.
Started out with special operations veterans, helping Navy SEALs and Marine Raiders and some really interesting folks in the military. Um, kind of go through a similar, if you know, questions and transition part in their life, just like maybe young people are going through. Like, first of all, how did you get tied to veterans?
Oh yeah.
And then second of all, where's the over? I mean, I can kind of see the overlap, and I'm pretty sure our audience
Yeah.
can kind of see where you're going to go with this. But I'd love to hear your perspective and your words that kind of help sew it all together.
Yeah. I got introduced to a guy who he was a Navy SEAL. He had already transitioned, and over coffee, someone introduced us. And I don't remember why we were introduced per se. I think maybe he was looking for work or something. That's kind of how I remember this. This goes back to like 2013, 2014. And I shared what I was trying to do for teenagers, which is to help them grow in self-awareness and just feel like this missing link in school, like where you could do well in all these academic pursuits. and not really have a clue of who you are and how to make decisions for yourself. So this very early curriculum we had designed, I was sharing this with them. I really just like friends comparing notes about what we're doing. And then he was like, you know what, this sounds so like relevant to another guy that's going to start this organization called the Honor Foundation. He goes, I think you guys should talk. And I was like, I don't know why I would talk to him, but if you think so, okay. And within like 24 hours, I was on a phone call with the guy that started the Honor Foundation, Joe Musselman. And he was kind of similar. Like, I don't know why we're talking. I'm like, I don't either, but I'll tell you what I'm doing and you tell me. And as I was sharing, I think just it kind of lit him up that there's this missing piece as well, that you can kind of learn all the career things, learn all the technical parts of career transition, and still maybe miss out in the sense of inner compass and introspection and stuff. So the challenge for him to me was I should come in and test it to see if it works. And I mean, for real, here's what I said. I go, Joe, my grandfather was in World War II in the Army. That's the closest I've ever been to the military. I support the troops for sure with a sticker and a ribbon. But I was like, Joe, I'm afraid of middle school kids. I am certainly terrified of coming in to work with special operations community. And he was just like, no, it'll be great. You'll be great. And I'm like, that's a lot of confidence for someone you met on the phone. And within a few days, I was in the classroom it was considered cohort 1, but it was really like three to five people that were in a room kind of vetting this idea of an institute, a place to go at that time is for mostly Navy SEALs to transition and do it in a way that helped them not just get jobs, but get the right career, the right fit, etc. So I jumped in and very loosely, I was like, no, we're here to kind of hand this curriculum to you and we'll even train you how to do it. But I don't work here. I don't work with veterans. I work with kids.
Right.
And even that's hard for me. But it kind of worked, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of stories of the early days of figuring out how to kind of customize it and a ton of learning for me for culture and language and lingo and understand. But I've always held that kind of loosely. I always assume everyone's different than me. So it's like, yeah, it's not that hard for me to imagine that you all come from a different culture. I assume everybody does. Those were the early days. And what I started to notice was the similarities. Like what I promised that I would do, I really never did. I promised that we would customize the curriculum to the veteran community. And what we ended up doing was really just changing the way the workbook looked. We kept everything else the same. And the joke would be, as veterans have told me when they're transitioning, like, we're all just big kids frozen in time developmentally. We went in at 18 or 19 with these big questions about life that were answered. We were given a role, a job, a purpose, a community, and we didn't really have to think about a lot of that stuff until now. So working with someone who's retiring at 46 is not too dissimilar to someone who's graduating college at 22 in terms of the developmental questions that they're asking. So we've seen that to be true. Obviously, the subject of what we talk about is different depending on your age and experience, but the questions themselves are kind of the same.
I remember specifically in class this. I don't remember when we were at the Honor Foundation. Like 3 hours into a 4-hour session with veterans and faculty and non-veterans. These are business executives that are there to support the whole conversation, which is really amazing. And this veteran raising his hand, I don't even remember what was said by the faculty, but the veteran raised his hand. He goes, "All I know how to do is military stuff. Like what value do I bring? I don't know what I'm going to do." And the look on the civilian's face, first the faculty and then the folks in the back of the room that were guests, they're like, "Are you kidding me right now? You have so much to offer."
Yeah.
But there was so much confusion, perplexed, like, what? Tell me, what can I do? And it points back to the things that you're talking about with mattering. Yeah. It's, do I feel valued, and can I give value? Can I add value?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that veterans are struggling with sometimes. Because, and just, if you're a veteran listening, you're probably thinking about that next career, and you're taking your skill sets of things that you did Maybe it was in supply, maybe it was
Hmm.
in operations or whatnot. And you can draw some lines of similarity into business. You can draw almost a direct line and you can go do that. But there's this self-doubt and there's this unknown piece, and that the self-doubt comes in the form of, well, I know it in the military, context, but I don't know how to
Yeah.
speak civilian. One, when I get there, will they understand me? What will it be like to fit in? I mean, there's so many scenarios that we play in our mind, and it's this could potentially be a negative narrative that has yet to even happen. Um,
Yeah.
what are some things that you've had this conversation so many times with veterans that are stuck in this loop? What are things you think they need to hear right now, if that's them, or a recommendation for maybe a coach talking to a military member who's about to transition?
I think the most important thing that's true for veterans transitioning is also true for teenagers. The most important work is to get to know yourself through this. And that sounds cliche, but I really mean it. And I've been challenged quite a bit by veterans, even in the Honor Foundation, who, whether it's they raise their hand in front of a room full of 40 others or come up to me kind of privately, they'll say, "Are you telling me that I don't know myself?" Because I do. I'm a person of character. I know my principles, and my values and my beliefs. And I don't challenge that historically, but what I'm suggesting is in transition, all that stuff becomes worthy of re-examining because things are going to shift. And I think there's something about the kind of field of service that haven't experienced myself, but through observation, that field of being in the service actually holds a lot of that stuff together for you. And the process of transition is about getting to know yourself and what of that is going to stay with you. What's going to be absorbed, and what are you going to actually maybe even let go. And what I notice for teenagers, especially in today's day and age, with like whether it's social media or trying to present yourself to get into a really top university, both of those are by and large about creating a persona, creating a version of yourself that's deemed acceptable and worthwhile and valuable. And that persona that you create, I think for most people, it's not even a conscious thing. It's because mattering is so fundamentally core to who we are that we do it subconsciously, and we end up actually creating something, a persona that's not really close to who we actually are. And so you might get people who are impressed with you, who speak highly of you. You might actually have accomplishments. You might even be able to point to demonstrated things that would say you do have value, whether it's followers, whether it's a career or resume, acceptance letters, certificates, graduations, whatever. But that actually, you might not have had the answer yet of, do I matter? Like, this thing that I've done out here matters, but if that went away, and for veterans it often feels like it is going away, will I matter next? And so it's a really vulnerable thing to ask the question, do you see me? It reminds me of the Dr. Seuss book I have around here somewhere. Are you my mother? It's that core fundamental question of like, am I okay? Do you know who I am? Is what I have all right? Can I bring you anything that's worth it? It's a little drummer boy. It's like, it's these core questions. So, as you asked me about veterans, I think again, it's the human question. Do you see me? And I need some help, and I need a process. I think we all do, to really figure out who we really are. It's not evident. We live all day long with uniforms or um, masks that we put on, and rarely do we actually get to take that off and look at in the mirror who we really are.
I remember I don't know what year it was, but there was a time in my military career, in my early of the 24 years, uh, a, a, a leader had said, "Joe, you should create what's called an I Love Me book." And like, what do you mean? Like, anytime you get an award, or there's a really cool photo of you and the guys, whatever, like, start putting together, it's kind of like a scrapbook, but
Yeah.
it's a personal book of you, and you'll have your annual evaluations if you do well, and awards and citations and whatever. Just kind of build it
Mm.
out. And so as you were talking, about looking at your life. I mean, I have it. I haven't looked at it in years. It's
Uh,
kind of in this put away on the shelf kind of thing. But if I were to open it right now and look through it and say, "Hi, let's do some self reflection of my
yeah,
24 years,"
yeah,
and then answer a question that you had said, like, what would I keep and what would I let go? Not the past. I'm talking about like some of the best parts and what made those parts awesome, and how can I recreate that in the future? So
yeah.
maybe it's um, this one time in my military career, I was able to create with a group of people this really cool process that did XYZ.
Uh-huh.
The creative aspects, the camaraderie aspects, the culture aspects. How can I recreate that in the future with a totally different group of people in a totally different scenario? Let me pull that forward.
Yeah,
But then also look at that same book and say, man, this was a really tough time. I don't ever want to go through that again. So
yeah,
what do I not want to pull forward? What do I not want to ever go
right,
through?
right.
And maybe just kind of unload that. And I remember in the Honor Foundation, there was a night where we had veterans get up and tell their story.
Yeah,
And one gentleman got up and said, talked about unloading these massive rocks out of his rucksack.
hmm,
And that his life, he had this rucksack and he had been carrying burdens
hmm,
and physical pain and mental pain and all kinds of things. He'd just been carrying it for years. And if you look at this gentleman, you would not ever guess that he had any kind of vulnerability in them. They're like badass Navy SEAL, just like
yeah,
they're they're made to destroy other people and countries,
right.
not anything else.
Yeah,
But he was vulnerable and sharing how the process of answering these deep questions and self-reflection helped him start removing slowly these rocks from his rucksack. And holy cow, everybody in the room listening to this guy talk, it's it was we felt it. You could
yeah,
feel the emotional growth and healing that was occurring for this guy.
yeah.
It's powerful stuff.
And I think to connect some of these dots, the reason I think he was able to get there is because in the Honor Foundation, we were able to create this other kind of field, which communicated to him, you are appreciated here for who you are, who you really are. So you can let some of that stuff go. And I think you kind of asked this question earlier about if you're supporting someone, maybe coaching someone, guiding someone, or maybe you're a transitioning veteran and you have a friend that's also transitioning. You're kind of like, how can I best support them? I think it goes back to mattering. I think we can communicate to folks that here's the three skills of mattering. If you're taking notes, like one is to appreciate them, and that is expressing gratitude for who they are. I'm so thankful that and then looking for qualities, characteristics, examples in their life, like that's appreciation. Recognition then is number two. It's gratitude for something that they've done specifically. They're slightly different. They're together, but they're slightly different. And then the third one would be to affirm them, and particularly how their presence has made an impact. And I like this phrase that comes out of the research. If it wasn't for you, ... And as I was, for myself, a parent, dad of 3 kids, I also coach youth sports. I work with a bunch of kids, a bunch of veterans. I've started to incorporate that phrase into how I talk to people. I even did like a pizza party at the end of the soccer season, like a month ago. And I always have done, like, I'll take notes throughout the season about these girls and their unique qualities, maybe some like highlight moments. And at this pizza party, I always say like, hey, this is for this girl who, and she did this thing and she's so funny or whatever, sweet, kind. And then give him a little trophy or a little thing. And this time, because of that, the science of mattering, the research I've been learning about, I also included, if it wasn't for you on this team, we would be missing something. And then that was just, it was so easy to be like, oh my gosh, whether it was their humor, whether it was some girls and their diligence and hard work. For some people, it was a specific role that they played on the team. For others, like, you light people up when you come around us. Like, for each of them, it was a very clear. And so then I was like, and I know that these girls are 10 and 11. They're going to forget this. But what I wanted to tell them is, I want you to have an experience in this field of being on a team together, that you matter. And that as you go through, and I think it's the same thing for veterans, as you go through this next season of life, for them, it's middle school, you're going to have a lot of messages that say you don't matter unless you act like this, become like that, look like this, do these things. But I want to tell you that in this field, you matter for who you are. And you don't have to try. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to like strive. Just being you. I appreciate you in this way. I recognize you do these things. And if it wasn't for you, we would miss something. So I want you to have that field, because that in that field, you're able then to take risks. You're able then to explore things, to find out you love Star Wars stuff, like whatever it is. And I think it's the same thing that we're trying to do in Vector Accelerator, is create this field, this experience for someone as they go through transition to, discover who they really are outside of accomplishments, external validation, resume, uniform, or lack thereof in terms of where they're going. Like, you and who you are inherently have value and worth. And it's out of that you can make choices that are clear.
That is so well said, Scott. Man, I'm so many memories are hitting me from the Honor Foundation, because you spent so many years there. I spent 4 years there inside that, and so we worked with hundreds of veterans, and the appreciation, the recognition, and affirmation happens very organically now, because they've been doing it for 10 years now. It's very, the staff that work there are incredible, and the volunteers are incredible, and we're able to provide that for those folks. But I remember designing Vector Accelerator with you and ideating, how do we create this for the veteran who's maybe learning about Vector Accelerator for the first time? They log in, and here's this online platform. How do I get affirmation from that? Mm-hmm. But your years and years of work and research with youth and various platforms, you've brought all that wisdom into this program, where we've designed it in such a way where it works better in pairs. Like, if you're going to go through this as a veteran, we highly encourage you to pick a buddy who's also thinking about getting out and go through it together. Yeah. And then start tapping on other people's shoulders saying, hey, Uncle so-and-so, you've been out of the military for 10 years. Yeah. Would you mind if I touch base with you as I go through this? Mm-hmm. And as a veteran, we want you to not transition alone ultimately, so you can get connected and feel that affirmation, get that feedback. Yeah. Get some counsel and guidance as you go through it, so you're not alone. And here's a quick tip for a veteran. If you're listening to this and you're not sure about Vector Accelerator, you're not sure about any of this stuff, if you want a quick response to figuring out if you matter, mm-hmm. call somebody who you love and respects you and knows you really well. And it might not even be a family member. It could be like maybe as a high school football coach from back in the day, but you still keep in touch. Call them up. And once you get past some of the humor and the banter that'll probably happen from this question, it's going to get serious. But it's like, hey, you know me for so long. What is it about me that you love? Mm. And wait for the awkward pause and let them think about it, chew on it, and then just stand by for some goodness to come your way. Because it's a great way to, one, get that appreciation, recognition, and affirmation almost in one conversation. Yeah. And this is just a taste of what Vector Accelerator can do for you, though. Like, because there's so many more deeper questions and ways to really pick at this and dig at it and get closer to clarity.
Yeah, you just shared an insight into, like, it's like a teaser, a trailer of what Vector Accelerator does. It's, as you're saying that, I'm like, we want Vector Accelerator to be for everybody. But just as you said that, it's like, but it's not for everybody. If you're not willing to do something like that, which takes courage, vulnerability, it's awkward, it can be weird. I mean, it's like, and some people, frankly, just aren't ready for that, or will never want to do that. And
well, I mean, it is weird, right, Scott? If I call you out of the blue, Scott, totally what is it about me? What is it about me that you love? You know?
Yep. So bizarre. And it would take me like 2 beats to make a joke, and then I'd realize, oh, that's actually a serious question. And
it's a serious question.
Of course, I'll give you an answer. I'll give you an answer now, and then I'll also text you later. And if you're when you hear that and you like actually imagine yourself doing that and it makes your heart beat like a little bit faster, I want to tell you this is your sign that you should do that. This is whether it's the universe, God, it's speaking to you saying, do it.
Yeah.
And then literally open up your phone and whoever comes to mind first, scroll through your contacts. And if it just, I don't know, there's a name that sticks out to you, that's the one. Go and do it. Send them even a text if it's too vulnerable to call them and just be like, hey, I'm doing this weird thing called Vector Accelerator. And these weird guys want me to like ask this bizarre, I know it's dumb, but here it is. And I'm so sorry. Just do it, play it like that. Blame us.
Blame
And then
us for
see
sure.
what happens. I used to have kids take photos in an assembly of a slide that I'd post up on the screen that would have something of the effect of that to their parents, and then text their parents and say, I'm in this thing, I'm supposed to ask you this question. And it was stuff like that. What do you appreciate about me? What do you notice? What do you love? And then I would have some volunteers just raise their hand and say, what did you hear? What did your parents text you back? And these parents are in the middle of their workday. They're like, they're at Costco. Like, what? It was this. And I used to have kids like share, like, what did your, and so many times, a kid would start sharing with like a microphone to the rest of their school. And they just start choking up, hearing the things that their parents thought of them. And there's something about even that distance of the text that would, I think, enable them to be a little bit more open and honest. So yeah, absolutely. Like that's the perfect example of what it looks like to step into mattering. And to imagine you could do that for someone else too. Like, hey, I know you didn't ask me what I appreciate about you, but here's a voice note. I'm going to tell you anyways. You can go communicate to people that they matter right now. I see you. You're valuable to me. If it wasn't for you in my life, here's what I'd be missing. And that literally could be a lifesaver.
What I love about Vector Accelerator is it's not just that one question. There's so many questions that we've created for veterans to journal. So those that are curious, go check it out, log in, create an account, and you'll recognize our faces. Scott and I are guides, and we have a couple other really neat voices that in there as well. But we walk you through this process where you're going to be asked questions. We invite you to get a notebook out, print out the questions, journal, write down stuff.
Yeah.
And you're not alone in this. If you just watch the videos and you just journal and then you close the journal and put it away back on the bookshelf, this process is probably not going to work. You might get some usefulness out of it, but if you really want to take a deep dive, you're going to call people up and really connect with others on these questions, on your answers, on some of your thoughts and curiosities.
I'm so glad you said that. Yep. So vectoraccelerator.org. Buckle up. If it's the right time for you, it's wide open for you to get started.
Sweet. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Joe.